Hello and welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show, number 108, if these things are to be believed. And it's a huge pleasure to be joined by hogtiechamp and Ozzy. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Can we hear you, Hogtie? Oh, you're just waving. Okay.
Yes,
And
we're
what's
good.
even more exciting is that we will be joined, hopefully within the next hour, by Concordance and by Shanna. So that's something to look forward to. But we can't wait for them. The show has to go on. And I thought we'd start with a few little questions about news items that I've seen in the last couple of weeks since we last did a show. And the first one, you'll have to be watching, I hope you've got Vaughan open, have you? You'll need to see the pictures, otherwise this isn't going to work. Have you got that open?
I'm trying to get it open right now, actually.
Okay, I'll wait a couple of seconds. Whilst you're doing that, let me just remind people, if you're watching this subsequently on YouTube, then we now do this show on Vaughan TV, a link to which will be in the description. And it's uploaded within certainly the last few have been within a few hours, but certainly within 24 hours of the show going live on Vaughan TV, it will be up on YouTube. But if you want to see it live, if you want to interact, then you have to go to Vaughan TV. As I say, a link will be in the description. You can also download an audio file of the show from the Magic Sandwich Show website, which the address is, hopefully you'll be able to see it below, www.magicsandwichshow.com. Okay, have you got Vaughan TV open now, gentlemen?
I don't. I'm having a problem for some reason. It keeps the browser window keeps closing. It says something about something wrong with my address bar. Could one of you gentlemen post the link for me? I'll just copy and paste it.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
It wouldn't be the Magic Sandwich Show if we didn't have technical issues. And I have to say, we've not done too badly. We started only 10 minutes late this time. So, there we are. And if people in the chat can just confirm that we can be heard and everything, I'd be so grateful. And if no one answers to "can we be heard," then I am frightened.
I'm hearing us fine through the Skype feed, the Vaughan feed. Yep.
Yeah. How's it going, Ozzy?
Very good. It's now working.
Okay.
I'm relieved to say.
The question I have for you, gentlemen, is what was the news item that came under this headline photograph? Or no, actually on this one it's somewhat different. What caused this to be twittered around on the internets? It relates to a news item within the last couple of weeks. Any ideas? It is somewhat local to me, I think, rather than you gentlemen, but does that mean anything to you?
I'm having trouble guessing. There was a raccoon or something came into the city epicenter.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't seem familiar.
I don't know. Was there a flood of the English Channel?
Well, you're getting closer. You're getting closer with the flood. I think what happened was that pretty much every single journalist in the country got sick of doing the general election coverage, and so when something totally minor happened, they got incredibly excited about it. This was actually an earthquake that took place in this country. We have them now and again, and it happened, as you can see, in the southeast of the country. I don't know what it registered on the Richter scale, but it was so minor that when all the journalists arrived to cover the story, they looked for all the damage they could find. And what you can see is pretty much all the damage they found. There was a bin that was knocked over. And I've got... it gets worse, Ozzy. It gets worse. Don't you mock. Do not mock. It gets worse because we also had 2 garden chairs tumbled in the quake.
Was anyone hurt? Were there casualties?
No, they searched all around trying to find anyone that had been injured in the slightest. Absolutely nothing. This is headline news in this country when we have an earthquake. Now, I was trying to figure out, both of you probably in earthquake free zones.
Never been in, yeah.
this was there's been a recent earthquake in Japan, hasn't there? That actually did some serious damage. But this is as good as we get on earthquakes in this country.
Well, I do notice it was Mouse. Somebody here in the comments put four. Mouse Geek says in the comments four, assuming that's answer to the question about the magnitude of the earthquake. And I see a couple of news stories that say 4.2. One of them brazenly says it was a 4.3. Is that a big earthquake? I've never been in one. I don't even know what that's like. But four sounds like a big number for an earthquake. No.
I think one of the reasons it didn't have much effect is it took place a couple of 100 miles underground. But there again, I think most earthquakes sort of like take place at that sort of depth. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that does the scale go up to 10? I'm not sure.
It in fact does not.
10 is the highest.
No.
Thank you.
No, it does not. No, it does not go up to 10.
Somebody in the chat disagrees with you.
Yeah. 10 is the highest.
AK says that 10 is the highest.
Oh no, here we go. No, my understanding is it's a logarithmic scale.
That's right.
So as you every time you and is it base 10? I think it's base 10 logarithm. So that means that a 5 is 10 times as much energy or whatever they measure it in as a 4. And conceivably, you could just keep doubling the number. Actually, we were just watching yesterday a special called, one second, Miss Janet, I believe I said you guys need to be quiet while you're eating your oatmeal. We were just watching a special on the last day of the dinosaurs. And they were talking about the meteor that struck the asteroid fragment that struck the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago. And they gave an estimate, well, if we were to put this on the Richter scale, it would be like a magnitude 18 or something. I can't remember what the number was, but it was quite a high number because of the amount of energy that would have been felt, even thousands of miles away. But I'll look it up. If somebody says I'm wrong, I'll look it up. Hang on.
He's so good at that. But the idea that you could bribe children to be quiet by giving them oatmeal is something is novel to me. You didn't honestly think that was going to work, did you?
I do actually, and now she's going to go off and watch a movie. My kids are very, very easily bribable with oatmeal, with pretty much any fruit, a little bit of craisins or a fresh banana. Like they're candy, not so much. They're not really into candy. Isn't that weird?
Well, that means they're safe from me anyway.
You and your van. Why do you want to go to this guy's van for candy?
Mind you, I do have lots of bananas very close to hand, but no, we'll not go there. This is an interesting thing, and if you know the answer to this, please don't shout it out straight away. But somebody had one of their high school photographs posted on the internet recently, which I'll now bring up, I hope, with the press of a button. And the question, if you know the answer, don't shout it out. We'll give the audience a chance. But do you know who that person is? Can you see him? It should be on your screens by now.
I see him, but not familiar.
Okay, does anyone in the chat seem to know who this person is? Not looking like it. All right, I'll give you a clue. Imagine that he no longer has any hair. Someone's messaging me. Hold on. Oh, this is going to upset everything. Oh. You're not seeing anything on Concordance's messaging me?
I wonder if he's looking for the...
he's looking for it on Skype. Yeah, Concordance, I'll bring you in a second, but he obviously must be watching because he's not listening on Skype. And
I've sent him the watch link.
That's odd because I can see it.
Hogtie, can you see it?
It's clear that people in the chat can see it as well. Have you got Vaughan? You've got Vaughan open.
I do, yeah, but I'm still stuck on that last image of the chairs that are toppled over.
Oh, well, refresh. See if that helps.
Okay. Must be it.
Someone's asking, does he now have a goatee? Is that helped, gentlemen? Can you see a picture of somebody?
Oh, yes, 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 I see it.
Right. Okay. I
Oh, I
wonder
think
why.
I did.
Wonder why it took so long for you lot to catch up, because everyone in the chat's been seeing it for some
Oh,
time now.
I think I know who that is.
All
Yeah,
right.
I got it
So,
right away, but I just don't know who it is. Yeah.
You don't
I'm
know
not
who it
supposed to.
is.
I'm not supposed to say, or
Well, not yet. Imagine him without hair. Uh, uh,
that's a big
Hogtie.
clue.
And somebody in the chat says, does he now have a goatee? Which is a big clue. So
Oh,
his answer to that is yes.
he's got it. Yeah,
Well,
whoever that is.
I now have a guess based on those two bits of information, but I still don't see it in the face. I would not recognize this guy as that guy.
Go on, you can
Okay,
say who
look
it is.
carefully at the eyes. Look carefully at the eye. It's Matt Dillahunty.
It is Matt Dillahunty, yes. Apparently someone posted that on Facebook, and I'm not betraying any confidences because he then subsequently reloaded it on his Facebook. But I don't know. I don't remember thinking, or never sort of thought what Matt Dillahunty looked like with hair. But I don't think I would have got that. I don't think I would have got that. I'm getting messages from Concordance and Shanna. Are you ready to join us as well? Just give us a
She was
second.
just she was just waiting for a join link, but you just need to add her to the call. Yep, she says yes, she is.
Yes, right. Well, this is going to take a few moments. I'll leave that up because I've got to now redo the screen captures and add people to the call. So, enjoy the image of Matt Dillahunty whilst I introduce other people to the call. We'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. Okay. Okay, we're back with you live again. I apologise about that. I knew it was going to happen. Whenever someone joins a Skype call, I've got to rejig things. It's one of the reasons why we're somewhat reluctant to take live calls now, because it messes up the whole Skype call. But welcome, Shanna and Concordance. It's been a while. Where have you been?
I work for a
Me
living.
or Concordance? Yeah. I have a job. Shit to do. Me, I took a new job, so it kind of changed my schedule a little bit. But I'm settling back in.
And how's the new job going?
I love it. I love it.
Well, I see that it may have improved on the professional level, but on the domestic scale, you've let that room really go to ruins, haven't you? Look at it.
I know. Inexcusable. I know. I'm trying. Okay,
well, you weren't with us at the beginning, Concordance and Shanna, but we were looking at some of the pictures that were sort of like related to news items that have occurred in the last couple of weeks, and we'll move quickly on. And I thank you for the audience for the patience in getting this sorted out. Hopefully there won't be any more interruptions, but you never know. Let's have a look at this picture, which should be appearing on your Vaughan TV screens now. So you can see that. Let me know when you've got it, and let me know what you think the story behind this picture is. Anyone shout out.
Crap, that's Ireland.
There we go.
Gay marriage.
Because if it had been in Texas, it would have said, y'all are invited to the wedding.
Was I muted this whole time?
And also, it wouldn't have been about gay marriage if it had been in Texas.
Well, you don't know. It might happen one day. So the story here being, obviously, the island voted for the right for people of the same sex to get married by a pretty much astounding majority. I think 62% in favour.
Now, DPR, I understand that's a civil arrangement that's not in the church. The church doesn't have to. In fact, the church mandatorily won't allow them. Is that right?
I don't know.
They cannot get married in a church. They can just have a legally recognized union.
I'll have to check that. I'm not sure that that's correct. But talking about the church, what was the church's response to this vote? In particular, the Catholic Church's response.
They reiterated their long-standing and never-changing policy that it's again the Bible.
Again,
It's again it.
it is.
It's again it. Yeah.
One of the Vatican spokespeople went a little bit further than that, though. Did you hear his statement? He said that it was a defeat for humanity.
Yes. Yeah. The
Comment,
Pope's all
please.
nice. Everybody loves the Pope, but let's just face facts. Catholic Church has not moved on and will not ever move on.
A defeat for humanity?
Yes.
That's a direct quote?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
That's
terrible quote.
horrible.
It's not terribly catchy. It's not witty, and it's more grand than the situation deserves. It's not his best work, I would guess.
Clearly not.
Yeah, I don't feel, as a member of humanity, I don't feel the least bit defeated.
No.
Stands falsified right on its face.
Yeah. For those of us who don't understand that little sort of west of the continent part of the world there, so is this Ireland? So, by the way, I learned about your geography from CPG Grey videos. So apparently Ireland isn't like one thing. There's the island of Ireland, and then Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, but the rest of Ireland isn't. So I don't even know where this vote took place. Like, what does this mean? And my second question is, whatever country this is, do they have a state church? Like, do you have to get married in a state church there? Or is it more like Canada or the US where the churches are separate from the...
Well, to answer the first part of the question first, Ireland is an island. Ireland, I-R-E-L-A-N-D, is an island, I-S-L-A-N-D, to the west of the United Kingdom, which is sort of like partitioned. The northern part, known as Northern Ireland, is part of the United Kingdom. Southern Ireland, which makes up the rest of Ireland, is its own independent country. As for the requirements for state marriage, I have no idea. And now I'm feeling shabby because I should have looked into this story more thoroughly than I have done.
Okay. Well, my middle question was even dumber than that. Was where did this vote happen? Is this so? This is not part. This has nothing to do with the United Kingdom,
No.
right? Okay, so this is the other part, the Southern Ireland. Okay.
Concordance has got something to read.
Yeah, I want to read off the Catechism, Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2357. Basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, affective, and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. So there's no wiggle room there. And some of my favorite phrases, and we let you guys reflect on these. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. Yeah. No comments on that? No one wants to jump on that one?
Well,
Neither does oral sex.
yeah.
It's poetically written.
Yeah. So, and then, and I'm reading here from the official Catholic website, Catholic.com. Homosexuals who want to live chastely can contact Courage, a national church-approved support group for help and deliverance from the homosexual lifestyle. So it's okay to be a homosexual, but not to express your sexuality in any way if you're born that way. Homosexual persons are called to chastity by the virtues of self-mastery that teach them inner freedom, at times by the support of disinterested friendship. By prayer and sacramental grace, they can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection. Yeah, it's amazing that they don't have more gay members or even, say, priests.
Yeah.
Well, one of the comments that was made by a priest, or maybe of higher rank in the Catholic Church in Ireland following the vote was that this showed and I quote, a need to reconnect with the with the young. I kind of think that connecting with the young was probably one of the reasons this vote went so drastically wrong for them.
That's dark.
Yeah. Too soon, DPR. Too soon.
No, I think for a country which is well known to be a Catholic country, I don't know quite what the religiosity of it is, but this is a great kick in the face for the Catholic Church, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
it's a repudiation of more than well over a millennium of Catherine doctrine. I mean, it really is something to be celebrated, right? I mean, this is a 2/3 of the population saying, no, you've got it wrong. We don't want this. We're going to make it legal. Not only do we not think it's immoral, we think it should be legal, right? I mean, that is an absolute repudiation en masse of a core Christian and Catholic teaching. So, I mean, it's fantastic news. And to the extent that the Catholic Church digs in its heels and does what Concordance predicts will happen, which is never change, the faster that church will go extinct. I mean, I know DPR wanted to talk at some point about the sort of the decline in religiosity in the U.S. according to some polls. I'll have something to say about that at that point, but it ties into this. That, these religious institutions really do themselves a disservice by not keeping up with the times. While trying to be beholden to these creeds, they don't realize that they are making themselves go extinct. I mean, religions really survive and thrive by evolving, and the more they ossify and harden in this way, the faster they go extinct. They need to evolve, and if they can't evolve, well, they're just going to disappear. And the Catholic Church is on its way to disappearing because of this kind of thing.
They have rather nailed themselves to a cross, so to speak.
Oh, that one hurt. I got a comment here. So it strikes me that this is a case where the viewpoints, the religious obligations of let's say, the religious obligations of a majority of the people, but the actual opinions of a minority of the people was codified as law in Ireland and in so many other places, that these people who no longer really represent the population impose their religious beliefs on so many other people, which is why it's always so frustrating when people say, atheists are so annoying, and if we're not being bothered, why are we so worried about other people's religion? Why do we hate God so much? It's not that. The reason why atheists need activism, really secularism needs activism, or multiculturalism sort of needs some activism. It's that nobody's ever content with their own beliefs sitting inside their head. They need to make sure that everyone else is living according to the code that they think is right. So, here you have a majority of Irish people felt a certain way, regardless of their actual religious affiliation. Why has it taken us so long to get to this point where people's actual feelings on a subject are reflected instead of the religious dogmatic position? The Catechism of the Catholic Church is determining what policy actually was in Ireland up until this referendum. Why should that be? What is it about religion that makes it incompatible with non-religious thought, secular thought?
Well, in this instance, I think you might be putting the cart before the horse. I mean, I think that the shift in attitudes regarding homosexuality and same-sex unions is actually very recent. I mean, it's only been, perhaps a decade or so that there's been a big shift in this attitude towards approving of gay marriage. So, I mean, I think there are other issues that are perhaps a little more puzzling, but this one doesn't puzzle me that it's taken this long. I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, I'm 50 now. When I was growing up, we still talked about couples that were living together but not married as shacked up and living in sin. Right. I mean, I was like 10, 15 years old and I was still speaking that way, and people around me were still speaking that way. That vocabulary is gone now. We don't hear about, if two people get together and are living together in a romantic relationship, we don't talk about them as living in sin or shacked up. Right. I mean, we don't think that it's anomalous that they're not married and living together. Those days are gone. Right. So but homosexuality, that was beyond the pale when I was a boy growing up, right? So I'm not surprised that it's taken as long as it did, given just how successful the church was, and not just the church, but a lot of religions in selling the idea that homosexuality is moral depravity, right? It's to just that we've just sort of shaken that idea off, and it's taken this long to realize, well, wait a minute, if it's not morally depraved, if there's nothing wrong with these people, if these people aren't perverts and we don't have to worry about them and their character and what they're like, then it's just a matter of their personal preference and their sexual and romantic dispositions and leanings. Then there's no victim. Then let's leave them alone, and we shouldn't prejudge them, and we shouldn't discriminate against them by forbidding them from having the same rights and privileges that the rest of us enjoy. I mean, I'm unsurprised that it's taken this long. In other words, does that address your point, Gordon?
When I was a kid, I remember blue laws. You couldn't go to the grocery store Sunday, or I think maybe the grocery store might have been one of the few places that was open on Sunday, and that's not that very long ago. And a lot of that was the sense of, we're creating religious morality by making sure that no one has any distractions from, going to church on Sunday, and that's what you should be doing. So this state-supported convention that benefits certain religious organizations. Now, if your religious day is on Saturday or Friday, you're kind of out of luck. So I know a lot of people felt that was, in its own way, a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. And since then, we've gone away with most of them, although there's still some things like Texas very recently upheld the law that you can't sell cars on Sunday. That's something that should be illegal. And why? Because for some people, Sunday is a religious holiday, a routine religious holiday. But for others, it's not. So, we're living as a minority in what should be a secular state, but is in many ways de facto a religious mandated state. Is it the same in Canada?
Well, we've certainly had our changes too. We had the same thing. You couldn't buy alcohol on Sundays. Sunday shopping was very, very limited and whatnot. But no, I mean, there's been. I mean, the thing you remember too about Canada is that our Constitution and Charter of Rights and Freedoms is what 20 some years, no 30. Got to do the math here. I guess 30 some years old. I mean, we fairly in 81 fairly recently. Constitutionalized and came up with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and as a result, it's given us occasion to have some issues come up that, like, wait a minute, we now have to take a look at this against this new charter. There are lots of things that we did just because that's the way we've always done it, and but a very clear charter that was formed, and obviously towards the end of the 20th century, which I think to most people they're a little surprised to hear that it came along that late, but it was our charter came about in. Having ample opportunity to look at other countries and see that there's, good things from their human rights and some things that don't seem to work out all that well. So I think it's a very well written one, but it's now given us a chance to sort of evaluate a lot of these things and to say, well, why are we married to this Sunday thing? So I think we've seen since the late 80s that just all of those little cultural remnants, just sort of year after year, they go away a little bit further.
Yeah, I was reading about a case recently where certain ultra-Orthodox Jewish people, Jewish men, Hasidic Orthodox Jews, who, by their religious views, are not allowed to touch a woman who's not their wife. That's part of the religious tradition that they follow. But of course, they also live in a modern society. So when they go to sit on an airplane, if the person sitting next to them is a woman, that poses a no-fly problem for them. They cannot accept that contact. So they will, and they can't speak directly to the woman because, again, that's also forbidden to them. They have these religious beliefs that inconvenience other people. And so they stand there, I guess, lost in the aisle and wait for a male flight attendant or a pilot or someone to finally come along and try to deal with the situation. And in most cases, people go out of their way to accommodate these bizarre traditions. At what point does...
If you look at the screen on Vaughan TV at the moment, you will see an example of that.
Yes. Yeah. This is an example. Go ahead.
If I recall correctly, this person, it wasn't so much contact with fellow female passengers. It was actually because they may be flying over unconsecrated ground or something.
That's
like
right.
that. Yeah.
Graveyard.
Give us the backstory.
Yeah, Ben Gurion Airport in Israel flies potentially, depending on the direction it's facing, can potentially fly over a graveyard. This man is a member of a tribe, and I can't remember the name of the tribe, who are the traditional priests of the group. And for them to enter a graveyard would defile them, and they would no longer be holy and pure. So they wrap themselves in plastic, and this is obviously a very dramatic example of that, in order to avoid contamination. But the same thing has been offered for seating on airplanes. Men are allowed to wear a kosher vest that prevents their skin from ever coming into contact with the skin of a female they are not related to or married to, so that they won't violate their beliefs in that manner. So, I mean, besides the ridiculousness of it, everyone else is made to feel uncomfortable. Everyone else is inconvenienced by the fact that they have these beliefs. It's not a trivial question. Should we allow this? Should society permit people to on others, again, sort of de facto? I don't think it's as obvious as saying, no, that's stupid, because obviously we all have things we feel very strongly about. But I'm curious why the religious belief in particular allows them such a special position.
Well, I want to say specifically of the Jewish faiths that they kind of escape a lot of attention. A lot of times when we're in this sort of wacky corner of the internet, we talk a lot about the Christianity, especially the sort of radical evangelicals, because most of us are in a part of the world where that's sort of an issue. And once in a while we talk about Islam because, of course, for obvious reasons. And we always make the same observation that, like the moderate mainstream Christians are relatively sensible people. We just disagree with them on this one belief, but that's fine. Go ahead and believe what you want. But then we've got the nutters who are like trying to mess up the schools, and they're out there with their bullhorns and carrying signs about the world ending and whatever else. And the same thing with Islam. Of course, the Muslim family down the street from you are nice folks, but then there's these people that fly planes into buildings, right? We always make that distinction. I think we have the same thing with the Jewish faiths, in that they don't really seem to do a lot of crazy stuff. They have these really weird dietary restrictions. Well, that's fine. You know what? If a Jewish person wants to have a meal with you, but then won't eat ice cream with the meal because it was too close to the meat, because there's a rule about that, whatever. That's fine. That's up to him. But I do think they have some of these, just like these extremists, just have these absolutely wacky beliefs. And the thing I find weird about it is their amazing ability to find all these loopholes in God's law, right? So, for example, wearing this plastic bag is going to be the protection, right? Like, it would be sinful or dirty or in some way inappropriate for this person to be in an aircraft flying over the wrong type of graveyard. But if he's wearing a thin sheet of plastic, and where does he get this? Like, what ancient writings tells him that as long as it's 7 mil poly, not 4 mil poly, it has to be at least 7 mil. Well, that's pretty thin. That's probably 3 or 4 mil poly. But as long as it's the right thickness, like, where does he get this from? And it's like, I knew these Jewish people in Montreal is pretty big. There's a big Jewish community there, and they have these rules about how you can't do work on the Sabbath, and that includes lighting a fire. Well, they interpret that to mean that you're not allowed to turn your oven on. You can't start a meal cooking on Saturday because you can't turn the oven on. So what they do, they have special ovens. They have I forget what it's called now, kosher mode, so that you program in the day of the week into your oven so that the lights stay off when the proper day of the week comes along. They have other appliances that work that way. Some of them will on the evening before the Sabbath will turn on their oven to a very, very low temperature and just let it idle at a very low temperature, so they can still take food and put it in to warm the food. But they can't turn the oven on or off, but they can still put food into the oven to warm it, and they just let their oven run all day. And some of these kosher mode ovens have that ability. Some of them, when they're just like, well, I don't have one of these fancy ovens, they call a neighbor to come turn their oven on and off. And like, what is in their heads? Are they sitting there thinking like, well, gee, God sure saddled us with a whole bunch of laws, but I know a way around this law. Like, do you think God is up there going, oh, Jewish people, you got me. I totally did not see that loophole coming up. There's nothing I can do. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
I just want to go back to that picture because there are so many things about it that does he get on the plane and then put it in the bag? He can't get on the plane in the bag, presumably.
The concern is that he's going to be flying over a graveyard, and so if he's flying over a graveyard or cemetery, that's tantamount to setting foot in it, because of course when you're walking through a graveyard, the people are buried beneath you. The idea is you're above them, so it's sort of being above this contaminated ground that is the problem. But of course, the rules don't say how far above the ground must you be before you're safe. Well, apparently, an airplane at 10,000 feet that's not good enough. You're not safe then, right? So what do you need? You need a layer of plastic. Why? Because a layer of plastic will somehow spare you from moral contamination.
How does the plastic do that?
Well, obviously,
what are the magical properties of plastic?
There's no magical properties of plastic, except that we live in a culture where we associate plastic with kind of prophylactic measures, whether it's condoms or wrapping your meat in plastic, or you're buying something that's wrapped in plastic. You have the sense that it's safeguarded from contamination, right? Well, this is moral contamination, and so you have this idea of how to protect yourself from contamination. Plastic is what you use, right? Oh yeah, but what about moral contamination? We don't have a prophylactic measure for that. Plastic, and that's what you end up with. You end up with these cobbled together ideas. It makes no sense. Of course, it makes no sense. But that's where this comes from, right?
Well, then, I don't understand. I don't understand this at all. I mean, if God was really that upset about it? No, if God was really that upset about it, I mean, he would have prepared for the plastic. He would have foreseen that they could
fly over graveyards. Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't get
well, that's the whole thing.
Well, here's another example from the same group of ultra-Orthodox Jews. There was a school, and I can't remember where the school was now, where the women are not allowed to drive in this particular religious belief, this religious tradition. So any children who are dropped off by their mother are refused access to the school. So, their father has to drive them, or they have to take a cab. They have some other arrangement has to be made, and they take it out on the children, and it sets them up to sort of spy on each other. Saw your mom driving, so the kids now are restricted in whether or not they can go to this special school, based on how the kids do. I'm sorry, how the mothers get them to school. It seems to me the kinds of restrictions that are being put on other people who don't necessarily hold the beliefs is unfair. There's a fundamental unfairness to it.
Yeah, well, I think that the sort of what's troubling you here is, if anybody was trying to inconvenience everyone around them for almost any other reason than religion, we simply wouldn't put up with it. We would just say, F off. Too bad. We're not going to accommodate you at all.
Or that's illegal. That's an illegal level of discrimination.
That's right. That's right. And we have this problem. But it's a principled problem. It isn't just that we're capitulating in a cowardly way to religion or out of some tradition. It's that we have this other value within our culture, and that is freedom of thought and freedom of belief. We believe that people should have a freedom of conscience. They should be allowed to believe what they believe and practice what they believe, provided that they're not violating any laws. So there's this problem. People are allowed to believe things. Well, some people are going to believe absolutely cockamamie things. And, well, now what are we going to do? Now we have to make certain kinds of accommodations. I mean, we had a problem of this sort in Canada. We have Mounties, right? We have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They have to wear a uniform, right? They have to wear the sometimes the dress uniform, or just the ordinary policeman law enforcement uniform, but sometimes the dress uniform with the big Mountie hat and all of that. But there are some people who are of a certain faith, like the Sikh faith. And I remember there was one gentleman who was a Sikh. He has to wear a turban. He has to wear a turban as an article of his faith. He has to wear a turban. But he wants to be a Mountie. Well, what are we going to do? Are we going to say that no, the uniform requirements of being a Mountie have to take precedence over a person's religious belief? Well, you might say, well, look, you want to be a Mountie? You gotta wear the uniform, and you don't have to be a Mountie. So no, it's not like anyone's forcing you to wear this uniform. You don't have to be a Mountie in the first place. But there's these two competing values, right? The freedom of belief and freedom of conscience is something fundamental that we prize, and I think that we're right to prize. Are we going to prize that over a dress code? What amounts to a dress code, right? And so there's this problem. Just how much of a uniform are you allowed to get away with not wearing because of your religion, right? And of course, at some point, we just have to draw some lines, and where we draw the line is going to be a bit arbitrary. In the case,
can I throw one in, Ozzy?
Yeah.
There's another one, I think, on a very related note. One that troubles me a little bit is the ban on the burqa in France in courts, because the idea being that if someone's a witness, we want to be able for the jury facial expressions which will disclose their emotional content, their whether or not we believe they are telling the truth or maybe holding information back or dissembling. But in doing so, we're asking women to sort of give up their modesty, that they're told this is their modesty. It's about like asking a non-Muslim woman to stand up there and strip down to bra and panties in the witness, right? You know, it would be something that most people would say that that's beyond the pale, that's inappropriate, and yet there's a good reason. The sort of condition of giving someone integrity and comfort, and on the other is the right of the jury to sort of observe the witness in the way they would a non-Muslim. There needs to be. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, me. Yeah. So, did we see the story a while ago? I'm going to try. This is from May. This was about 2 months ago. This story here is from May, so I got the wrong one. But it was about 2 months ago, and it was a woman in Michigan who had filed a lawsuit against the Oceana County Sheriff's Department for forcing her to take off her hijab during a traffic stop. And you may or may not remember the story, so I'm just trying to find the right window here. So I'm back with you guys. Yeah. So so the story goes was that she was pulled over by a deputy sheriff, and he'd asked her to remove her protective religious headgear, to borrow John Stewart's reference to it, and she refused to do it. And he was also very rude and insulting, and she also said there was some sexual thing that went on. She filed this whole list of complaints against the guy, and had gone in, to the police station and filed this complaint against him. Later, files a lawsuit, and the problem for her was that whole exchange was recorded. Right, the police officers now have the vest cams, the dash cam, and whatnot, and none of this stuff happens. At one point, he had asked her to remove it, and then she was like, "No, I'm not. It's a religious thing." And he was, "Okay, well, whatever. Here's your ticket." There was no indication that he was really forcible about it or causing any sort of problems or whatever. But it's incredible how she had taken that little incident by the road and just blew it up into a racist, sexist, religious persecution. I mean, just everything. She just threw everything at it. And it turns out that it was just her reacting to the situation. So she ultimately was charged for filing a false police report because she went into the police station and said, well, this and this and this and this happened, all making allegations about what an awful police officer this was, that would very much serve to his detriment. He may have lost his job over it, all these terrible things. So she signed that statement saying, this is my statement. And that in the States is perjury. You don't have to be in a courtroom to commit perjury. If you sign one of these witness statements, it has the same effect, and you're told when you sign it, has the same effect as an oath in court. And it's clear that the majority of the statements she was making about what an awful fellow this was were not true. So she ends up having to go on trial now for filing all these false statements against this deputy sheriff. Her lawyer argued that the reason that this case should be thrown out was because they didn't have sufficient evidence that she was the one who filed the statements, because all they knew was that a woman had come in wearing a hijab and signed her name to the statement and left, and they never asked her to remove her hijab to confirm her identity. Since they didn't ask her to remove it, they couldn't confirm who she was, and therefore there was no way that this woman, my client, could possibly be guilty of this crime.
Brilliant.
And I heard that story, and I just went, okay, that's it. That's the end of it. The fact that now someone has argued for this, now that they've said that oh, well, gee, you can't function, justice can't function with us still wearing our protective religious headgear. Okay, you know what? This is why we can't have nice things, Muslims.
Yeah, no, that's the deal breaker, right there. That you just exploited the very thing that people are worried about. You just exploited this to your advantage, and now, sorry, like you said, we can't have nice things. This is not an accommodation that we should make. We've got a similar kind of thing happening right now. I mean, I'm not someone who thinks that it should be illegal. Like there are proposals in France to make the wearing of this kind of attire illegal, entirely illegal. I'm obviously not in favor of that. But I mean, we've got in Canada a concern right now. Well, what about people who are immigrants to Canada and being sworn in as citizens? right? They're going to take the oath of citizenship. This is a public ceremony. They're being admitted to the country. What about in a circumstance like that, right? I mean, no one's on trial or anything like that, but still, this is an official function, and you are sort of publicly declaring yourself to be a citizen of Canada. What about in a situation like that, right? I mean, this is a very official kind of thing. Should you wear that kind of be allowed to wear that kind of headgear or not, or should you disclose yourself, right? And that seems to me like, well, okay, there we can accommodate. It's not like they're applying for a passport photo, but if you're applying for a passport and you're getting your passport photo taken, that headgear better come off, right? So any kind of official ID, that stuff has to come off. We need to be able to identify you. We just cannot identify people just by a little eye slit. That's just not enough. And so it seems to me that where there is anything consequential at stake, like whether or not someone is going to be judged innocent or guilty in a court of law based on how a jury perceives their expressions, or whether or not they can fake their identity for the purposes of obtaining a piece of ID or a passport, or as in the case that you gave, Hogtie, of reporting a crime. In cases like that are of consequence, it seems to me they're so much the worse for your religious beliefs. We're simply not going to accommodate you that way. But I think in other cases where there's nothing so consequential, it seems to me that we can say, okay, fine, that's where we can make an accommodation.
What about the Amish? I mean, there are a large number of things the Amish refuse to do that we consider fundamental to them being citizens.
Like what? You think like military service? You mean?
Among other things, yeah, vaccinating their kids, but of course they don't send them to public schools. That's still optional.
They don't send them to school. So,
well, I don't know. I guess I'd have to do more research to really figure out what it is that prevents them from complying.
Just go to the level of compliance that they're demanding. I mean, the Amish don't really demand a great deal, do they?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, they enjoy, conscientious objector status, the way Jehovah's Witnesses do in time of war and stuff like that. But again, there are reasons why we do that, and you don't have to belong to a religion to enjoy that status. Although it might be a little harder if you don't belong to an identifiable group. So in the case of the Amish, I'm not aware of anything that is particularly consequential that would worry me, that would make me think, we really are accommodating these people a little too much. I can think of one thing. I'll give you an example, actually. I live in Amish country, actually Mennonite country. There's a lot of Mennonites in these parts. And when I used to live in southern Ontario, there were even more. There were entire regions of farmlands where it was just an awful lot of Mennonites. And driving could be a hazard, because you could be driving along and suddenly you could be at night. You'd come around a bend and suddenly there's a horse and buggy ahead of you, moving very, very slowly on a highway. Right now they're off to the side a little bit, but
with no lights.
Everyone with no lights. Right, they'll have a reflector, right? But at a certain time of day, you might not have your lights on yet, and so you're coming around a bend, and suddenly you're expecting that if there's a vehicle ahead of you, it's moving approximately the same speed as you. You come around a bend, and suddenly there's this, horse and buggy from the 19th century ahead of you, and you're coming up on it really fast, right? And it poses a threat. It poses a threat to those people, of course. It poses a threat to you and anyone else coming in the opposite direction, in case you have to make an evasive maneuver to avoid a collision with these people. So there are things like that but it's not like the body count is so high that we need to do something about it immediately. But there are accommodations that we always make to people's eccentricities. And again, it's because we have this competing value. We have this value that we have to let people believe what they want to believe, unless it poses a problem. So my view is, when and where it poses a problem, that's when we just say, too bad, right? And the example that Hogtie gave is a perfect example. Too bad. You want to come in and report a crime, we have to be able to identify you. That's how it's going to be. You're going to disrobe. We're going to see what you look like. We're going to take a picture of you. You want to apply for a passport? Same thing. But it seems to me if you want to be a Mountie and you want to wear a turban instead of the funny hat, well, okay, this funny hat or that funny hat, I don't think it matters a whole lot. People are still going to be able to identify you as a Mountie based on the rest of the uniform, right? But if a person was of a religious faith that required that they wear a certain kind of attire, such that they couldn't wear any part of the uniform, then I'd say, well, no, now this is consequential because now nobody can identify you as a Mountie, right? Now this is a difference that makes a difference. So it seems to me that these things have to be adjudicated in a case-by-case basis, unless we're prepared to say, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of belief is going to be ignored, and everyone has to live as if they believe and adopt certain secular values. And I don't want to live in a world where I'm not free to be religious. Should I ever change my mind? I'm happy to live in a secular world, but I want the option of changing my mind if ever I come to believe other than I do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's funny because I think that especially the radical evangelicals are quite convinced that this is exactly what we're fighting for, is a world where no one is free to believe things like that. And yet you make a good point. I mean, that we would actually fight for the freedom. Like I would not, I'm just going to repeat what you said. I don't mind paraphrasing what you said, but when I will say it word for word, I don't want to live in a country where I wouldn't be allowed to change my mind to become religious. That's pretty much what you just said. But no, it's a good point, and I think it's worth underlining because they always accuse us of fighting for a country where religion is just simply banned. It's ridiculous.
That's interesting. I think we're kind of converging on a slightly more complex solution to a problem. When I think about religious medical neglect, for example, that's another case where I absolutely am a radical anti-religious medical neglector. I think that it ought to be illegal. I think it ought to be punishable. And as horrible as it sounds, I think parents who, for religious reasons, neglect their children really have to suffer some consequences and lose their children. They've ceded their right to be good parents for reasons that are not entirely their fault. It's what they are taught to religiously believe. The damage was done not by them, but by the system of belief that they've failed to reject, which feels like a very unfair, uncomfortable position to have to take. But the net effect is children dying of easily preventable diseases. And there were a couple of test cases in Canada recently we've talked about before. Unfortunately, the outcomes, the courts feel the same way I do, that there are some fundamental rights that, regardless of religious belief, need to be respected. One of those is that children should have access to medical care when it's life-saving and not so intrusive that it requires an ethical board to resolve. I'm also thinking here of another case, and I tried to share this one with DPR, was about a soccer team. And on one of the soccer teams were two girls who played soccer with sort of with the boys. What is that called? Co-ed.
Co-ed?
Yeah, co-ed team. And a Muslim team, also in Canada, refused to play them because, again, you might end up with contact and it was inappropriate for their belief system. So, they backpedaled at the last minute, but in fact the game never actually occurred, and the stated reason at the time changed afterwards. At the time they said we're not allowed by our religious beliefs to play a team with girls on it, and could you get the girls to sit out the game so that we can play this? And then later it changed, and they said, well, we were just uncomfortable and unclear, and the messaging wasn't well conveyed, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Oh,
please go ahead. Oh, I was just saying that. Yeah,
well,
I heard
just before you go, Ozzy, I've just put a link in the chat to the item that Concordance was referring to. I did have a video lined up to play, but unfortunately I realised I haven't loaded it onto Exploit, so I can't show it. But sorry, Ozzy, do go on.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember the story a little differently. I looked at the video. Maybe there was more to the story than I'm aware of. The way I understood it is there was these were two teams, soccer teams in Toronto. one team had 2 girls that were on the team because at that school they don't have a girls team, so girls can play on the boys team. And according to this league that they're a part of, that's the rule. If a team can be co-ed if at whatever school there isn't a girls team and a boys team. And that was the case at this particular school. Then there was this other school that was part of this league, and it was an all-boys team at an Islamic school, and they showed up and they were playing. But at one point during the game, 2 girls come onto the field, and the other team says, "Well, no, we can't. We just we can't do this." So now what the referee probably should have done is said, "Okay, well, you forfeit the game then, and go home." But the coach of the co-ed team didn't want the game to end because they were up 3-1, and they wanted to score some more points against this team that they thought they could defeat quite handily, and they needed those points to sort of advance in their rankings and so the girls, I don't think they were asked, but I think they felt strongly internally pressured to say, well, I don't want my team to suffer because of this, and so they sidelined themselves, and then the game went on. And that seems to me absolutely awful. It seems to me that the coach and the referee should have said, no, this is just a game and it doesn't matter. You absolutely will not sideline these girls. This team will either play or they will forfeit. And maybe you will not advance in the rankings, but too damn bad. It may cost them something, it may cost you something, but there's a higher principle here. And I think what ended up happening in that particular case was kind of the worst case scenario. The other team didn't have to forfeit anything. They lost the game, but they looked like they were going to lose anyway. They were already losing at that point in the game. 2 little girls, 2 teenage girls got sidelined. A terrible message was sent to them and everybody else, and all for the worst of reasons. Right. The reason being we want to score a few more points so that we could advance in our rankings. Right. And everyone would have blamed those little girls if they'd insisted on playing out the game, because they might not have advanced, even though they would have won the game. So this just seems to me like the people here in this moment, they always have to make a decision. It's hard in a moment like that. There are people around you, and there's pressure. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Hard to think through the implications of this, but that's why it's important to think these things through in advance and to weigh these kinds of possibilities, because the day comes where you find yourself in that moral predicament. It kind of helps if you sort of thought through some of these moral dilemmas and can anticipate the broader implications. And this was a really, really bad thing. I mean, the message that is sent to girls here is that you could get sidelined, or you will have to sideline yourself for the sake of the team, for the sake of accommodating another person's religious bigotries, which is what this is. This is just religious bigotry. When they interviewed the coach of the other team, of the Muslim team, he kept saying, in the most transparently hypocritical and insincere way, I honestly, this is out of respect for women. It's out of respect for women. He kept saying it's out of respect for women. It's out of respect for women. It's not discrimination. It's out of respect for women. No. The rationale for why you do it is respect for women, but it is discrimination. No matter what your reason, it's still discrimination, right? What he was trying to say is that it's not a bigotry. It's not based on misogyny or a hatred of women. Well, maybe it's not. I don't know what's in his heart, but this is nevertheless discrimination. Anyway, watch the video if you haven't seen it. The link has been provided. It's worth watching that little video and seeing those girls, and listen to them as they describe why they walked off the field for the sake of their team.
You've described it much more accurately than I did, Ozzy. My apologies.
No. Oh, no, it's okay. I just happened to watch it shortly before the show started, and I only watched it. I didn't know about the story until you supplied the link, so I'm grateful to you.
Can you send me a link to that, Ozzy, and I'll put it in the description when it goes onto YouTube.
Sure. Yeah, just be a moment.
And I certainly want to encourage.
You don't need to do it now. Anytime in the next couple of hours.
Certainly encourage the viewers to watch it too, because this is one of those stories that's too sort of not captured. It's not captured well in the headlines. It's often billed as, Muslim boys high school soccer team refuses to play against team with two girls, and in some cases, yeah, it is depicted as if these girls were just thrown off the field in preference for these religious reasons. The story does get a little bit muddied because, well, for one thing, these are not children. I mean, they're minors, but they're teenagers. They're not children, and so the girls are accessible for interview, and they provided interviews saying, yeah, well, we chose to do that. But yeah, as Ozzy points out, and I won't repeat, but it's, the situation was complicated because of this. Oh well, anyway, so it's not that they were thrown off the field. This wasn't, to me, really an issue of like, well, girls can't play a boys' game. I don't think that was a suggestion. It certainly was a suggestion from the ISNA Muslim school coach. That was certainly his position, but it wasn't about that for the Catholic school. It was about what are we as a civilized and reasonable and free society going to do in terms of reasonable accommodation to other people's religious beliefs. The other thing to remember in the context of this story is that the Ontario Federation of School Athletic Associations has this rule, as Ozzy mentioned, that I'm just going to read directly from it. If a sport activity is not available for a female on a girls' team, she is eligible to participate on a boys' team following a successful tryout. This isn't just a rule for the OFSAA, whatever their athletic association. This actually follows court rulings on this topic. That when there isn't a girls lacrosse team, then the girls can play on the so-called boys lacrosse team. So this association and any schools that are members of this association, for this athletic association, they actually have, I mean, they're caught between a rock and a hard place, because they're enjoined by previous court rulings to provide places for girls' sporting events, on pain of getting charter claims against them for not letting these girls play sports. And on the other hand, they've got to make these accommodations for these other religious people that don't want to disrespect girls by letting them play sports. So it's a bit more of a complicated issue than what the headlines are putting out there.
Yeah, the rule basically says your school either has to provide opportunities for a girls' team and a boys' team, or a co-ed team, or else you ain't having that sport at all. What you cannot have is only a team that is only for boys or only for girls. That those days are gone. They've gotten rid of that.
Yeah, on pain of litigation. That's the thing.
Yes.
Pardon me for interrupting, but that's my point. Is that it's not just that the OFSAA decided to, well, this would be kind of a nice rule for the 21st century. They will get themselves and their member schools sued if they don't have a rule like this and then act in a fashion that's consistent with that rule. That's why I raised the issue of these previous lawsuits.
Right. Yeah. And so then you have the specter of a lawsuit from a religious group that says you're discriminating against us on some religious grounds because you're not. So now what do you do? Right. This is the rock and the hard place that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't, you're not respecting our religious beliefs because you're respecting the gender equality things.
Exactly.
You're not willing to run the risk of them suing you, so you're violating our religious beliefs. It's crazy.
Yeah. But you see, what's interesting with this is if this is like the whole the gay cake thing that happened in Ireland and it happened in the U.S. A baker who refuses to bake a cake for a wedding that's going to be used in a same-sex wedding. Right? You have these people who think that my right of freedom of religion consists of my right to behave in a discriminatory manner, to treat you differently than I would treat other people, right? And that, it seems to me, well, that's where the wheels fall off the cart here. This is where everything breaks down. Your freedom of religion is well and good, except when it starts to enjoin other people to behave in certain ways, or you're going to discriminate against people solely on the basis of your religion, right? Then I think that, you have a problem. That what you have, the problem there is that what you mean by freedom of religion is freedom to discriminate, right? That, I think, is something that we cannot accommodate. That's where we have to draw these lines and say, nope, sorry, you're going to bake that cake, right? I don't get to decide I don't like black people. I'm not going to serve black people in my restaurant, and I don't get and it doesn't matter if you're born black or you're born gay, or it has nothing to do with whether you're born or not. You just don't get to treat people according to these invidious comparisons, right? That just has to stop. And if your religion requires that of you, too bad, right? There's lots of religious practices that we wouldn't permit. I mean, if someone belongs to a religion where they think that sacrificing cats is the way to go, and they're going around the neighborhood rounding up stray cats and strangling them or eviscerating them or something like that to perform some kind of voodoo ritual, right? We would say no, we're just not going to allow that. And all you're doing there is killing a cat. It's not like you're violating some human rights, right? You're actually killing a cat that we might not even care about because it's a stray, right? Might otherwise die anyway. But we wouldn't permit that. We said the idea that freedom of belief implies freedom to practice whatever it is that you believe, even if it means discriminating, is a mistake. That's where we can't go that far in accommodating freedom of belief into freedom of practicing your beliefs, no matter what the practice is. There are people whose religious belief includes the right to behead people, right? I mean, it's hard to overstate how dangerous this idea is, right? But I mean, there are people who actually believe that they have a right. They're mandated by God to kill people, to behead them, because they've offended their religious sensibilities, right? Does that mean that in order to accommodate their religious belief, we have to accommodate what they see as their right to practice that belief? Because we do believe that a person has a right to practice their belief, but it's not unrestricted, right? And wherever it rubs up against another person's rights, that's where their rights stop, right? I mean, my rights end where your rights begin.
And one of the things, and let me just bring up this picture again. I hear time and time again from religious people that they demand that we must respect their views and beliefs. I'm sorry. Why? Why do they insist on this respect? I can't possibly respect someone that thinks it's sensible to wrap themselves up in a huge plastic bag. I can't respect someone that thinks it's not right for girls and boys to play sports together. I can't respect someone that thinks that women shouldn't be allowed to drive. I can't respect someone that thinks that beheading is acceptable. I can't respect any of these things. Why on earth should I respect this?
Respect is one of these funny words in our culture. It's become a yay word. It's a good thing. You should always show respect. You should be respectful. Well, I mean, obviously, I try to be respectful to people, and I think that's a good thing. But the idea that you should respect beliefs doesn't make sense. You got to respect people. You need to treat people with respect, but you don't have to respect beliefs. You don't have to respect ideas. But people have gotten confused about what it means to respect people, and they've gotten confused. They're confusing the idea of respecting an idea or a religion with tolerating it, right? And look, I tolerate Christianity and Orthodox Judaism and all kinds of New Age twaddle, and I tolerate Islam. I tolerate these, right? I tolerate them. I put up with it. What seem to me to be stupidities, right? Archaic stupidities and modern newfangled stupidities. I tolerate them, right? But I don't respect them. I don't respect them at all. At all, zero. My respect for these beliefs is nil, because I think they're fatuous. I think I think some of them are so egregiously irrational that I think they're laughable. I mean, I think Christianity is a serious religion. I think that it makes serious moral demands on a person. I can admire and respect a person that wholeheartedly believes these things and decides that they're going to transform their lives for the better according to the precepts of this religious teaching, which I think is not entirely daft. Okay, but I think the core doctrines of Christianity are just bonkers, right? I mean, I think it seems to me it's falsified by science, it's falsified by history, it's falsified by archaeology. I mean, on its face, Christianity is a non-starter, right? So my respect for the content of the religion is nil, but I tolerate it. I don't have to respect it. I just have to tolerate it. And the fact that I merely tolerate the belief doesn't mean I don't respect the people. I can respect. I mean, it seems to me I respect the religious people that I know and that I interact with and that I have contact with online. It seems to me I'm perfectly respectful of them, but I tolerate their ideas. I don't respect their ideas at all. And if we could make this distinction in our minds between respecting people and tolerating what we think are bad ideas and false ideas, we we wouldn't get sort of caught into this kind of liberal misplaced guilt of feeling guilty for not agreeing and not speaking deferentially and tiptoeing around people's beliefs. I'm very polite with people. I try not to offend people. I will say things. I have already said things right now that I'm sure will have really offended very deeply a lot of Christians. But I promise you, nothing I have said was calculated to offend. It wasn't said for the sake or purpose of offense, right? So I can't help but say things that are going to seem disrespectful, but I'm not being disrespectful of persons. But I don't respect the ideas. I am disrespectful of the ideas, but I tolerate the ideas. And religious tolerance is really what's important. And in the history of well, just in Western history, the idea of religious tolerance has always been pushed and has always been important, right? I mean, John Locke wrote a famous letter on toleration. That was an idea that caught on and helped mitigate and militate against an awful lot of conflict between Protestants and Catholics and sectarian violence in Europe in his day and ever since. And so we have ever since valued tolerance. But lately, just in the last few decades, I've noticed that the word tolerance has become a dirty word, as if to tolerate something was not enough. You have to go beyond tolerating, because to tolerate is actually to disapprove of something but put up with it. And that's not good. What you have to do is respect. And I call bullshit on that.
Shanna, did you want to chime in on this?
Well, with this particular issue, I agree with Oz. It's and I've said this for a long time, and I usually get the pitchforks pulled out when I do, but I don't have to respect any of this. I'm going to be respectful to the person, but I don't have to respect the beliefs. I don't have to respect the practices. I simply don't. And I think that I think there's this weird societal pressure to be nice, be respectful. That's the right thing to do. That's the good thing to do. And that's bullshit. I don't, and I'm not going to either. If they're bad ideas and they're bad beliefs and they're dangerous beliefs, that's how they should be treated.
It sort of like draws an interesting sort of like balancing exercise, though, doesn't it? If we agree, as I suspect we all do, that we respect the individual but not their beliefs, that can cause obvious conflicts, can it not?
It can. I mean, people have to be mindful and draw the line. They have to be mindful of that line that exists. And I can think that somebody believes complete nonsense, or I can think that their beliefs are dangerous, but I can still treat them like a human being. I can still be respectful to that person. I don't have to be belligerent and rude and cruel and all these other things just because I think they believe nonsense. And people just need to be mindful of that, because it's a real blurry line, and it ends up, and like I said, I think people get guilted into, oh, well, I need to respect the belief, because if I don't, then I'm not respecting the person. If I'm not respecting the person, then I'm a bad person. It's emotional terrorism. It's nonsense.
But
just being mindful can help.
I accept that, but obviously, what makes someone a human being, what makes someone a human being is their beliefs. So that's the issue that I'm sort of like trying to approach. How their beliefs are part of them. So to say that you respect them and their beliefs seems to be, on occasions, I can see that would cause difficulties. You're going to have to insult them in some way, aren't you?
They'll take it as an insult.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's meant as an insult. It's not a calculated move on my part to insult them as a person. Like, I'm about to say something right now that a lot of people find very insulting. I think that a lot of these people, with some of the beliefs that they have, and I could be in that group, and so could any of you four, is that they've never sat down and thought about these beliefs. They've never sat down and considered what they believe. They were just raised that way, and they took it for what it was and went on about their merry lives. And this sounds bad, but I don't think a lot of them even know any better, because they've never taken the time to learn any better or any different. So it's almost like a child being afraid of the monster under the bed. It's like, oh, that's precious, but it's okay. It'll be fine. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and there are many views and opinions that I hold that I probably have not thought through sufficiently to be able to justify them. And every time I talk to Ozzy, I come across another one where he challenges me about my beliefs, and I think, oh God, yeah, I haven't thought this through sufficiently. But there we go. I'm aware of the time. We've got a few other issues that people wanted to talk about. A concordance, are you still with us?
I'd like to follow up on one point if I could.
Yeah,
It's
of
very
course.
brief. Okay, it's very brief. It's just following up. It seems to me that there's a flip side to this. That this concern, that this pressure that I think we all feel to uh, to be respectful of ideas and beliefs, instead of tolerating them and being respectful of people, tolerating the beliefs, being respectful of people. What ends up happening is that some of us, especially those of us who are non-theists and secularists, have a tendency to to react the other way, right? Uh, our response is to say, "Look, I don't have to respect the belief," and the next thing we do, we find ourselves not respecting the people. We find ourselves treating the people like crap, and that is, I mean, that is really running in the wrong direction too, and that is allowing oneself to 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 be emotionally run by a bad argument. There's this bad argument that says that you have to respect beliefs, and then you realize there's something wrong with that. That's not true. But then you're not making the distinction that you should be making between beliefs and people. And then you decide, well, I'm not going to respect the belief, therefore I'm not going to respect the person. Next thing you know, you're treating the person with disrespect, and that too is a mistake. And it's one that makes us look bad, and it fuels the fears of the religious. And I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good. And of course, it's not good for us, and it's not good for them. It's not good for the discourse. It's just it's bad all around, and it's symptomatic of the same mistake. We need to distinguish between persons and beliefs. And yes, people do identify with their beliefs, but people are not their beliefs. If people were their beliefs, they would literally become different people when they change their beliefs, right? I would be killing you. I would be ending one person if I were to convert you to a different religion, and that's not true, right? I mean, I am still, I am still the Aussie that I was 20 years ago. I just have different beliefs, right? Only in a figurative sense am I a different person by virtue of having changed my beliefs.
I'll tell you where I struggle with that point is it's very easy to, in one sentence, say, respect. The way they say, the way the Christians will say, hate the sin, love the sinner. We can disagree with their beliefs, but you still want to respect the person. Where I really stumble with it is when. So I make the claim that I will assess people's beliefs based on on the merits of the beliefs, right? And there's some beliefs I respect and some beliefs I don't respect. And then I assess people based on their merits and how they present themselves to other people. And there's some people I have great respect for and some people not so much respect for. So where I really stumble is when you're dealing with somebody who has ridiculous beliefs and they're a jackass, right? Because I just don't feel an incentive to sort of treat them all that terribly cordially because I'm reacting to their awful personality in that way. I mean, I deal with a lot of people in these discussions that are, have crazy beliefs, but are really nice, approachable, sensible people. And I always treat them with respect. But when you meet somebody that's got crazy beliefs and they're a jackass to boot, I end up mocking everything about them. And then, of course, they use that as like a, what's what I'm looking for? Is it, they'll take my mistreatment of their personality and their presence as like, oh, you're like religious persecution. They'll turn it into religious persecution when it's, no, I just don't like you personally. I think Aaron suffers that same vice. I think most of you would agree.
Oh, well, that caused a tumbleweed to come across the conversation. No one.
Where's Aaron when we need him? Yeah, that would have been fun.
Well, just to fill in a bit of space, Owen will be with us either on the next show or the show after. We're organising a conversation concerning feminism, to which you're all welcome to join us. But it will also include Professor Phil Moriarty, who I hope you're all familiar with, a wonderful person, and also a female feminist movement organizer sort of person. I'm not going to name them because they haven't actually firmly yet agreed to appear on the show, but they will be better feminists than the last ones we had on. Leave it. Say no more about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not a high bar.
Yeah. But I'm going to give you the choice. I've got a couple of stories still to go through. One is the decline of religion in the US. One is in relation to the Duggars, and I know one person in particular wanted to speak about the Duggars. Well, in fact, no, I know two people wanted to speak about the Duggars. So I'll tell you what, I think that kind of suggests we're going to talk about the Duggars, does it?
I think Shanna should talk about them.
Well, Shanna will be talking about them, I'm sure, but I have to say that this is not a story that really has reached these shores, so I'd like someone to sort of like give us a little bit of background into it before I throw in my little tuppence worth into it. And it's either, I know that you concordants are familiar with it, and I know that Hogtie is, so it's between you two. Who wants to give us the backstory to this?
Go ahead, Hogtie. You probably got more factual accuracy on it.
Okay, Hogtie.
Well, I should have been listening instead of typing in the comments. Duggars?
Yes.
Duggars? Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, Lee. I believe I said in our pre-show Skype call, don't get me started. Yeah, so they've got a lot of kids. I mean, most people know this story. So where do I start with this? I mean, they got a lot of kids. They're up to 19 now. They've got a lot of fame for this. I think the thing that I would hope to draw our discussion toward is it's not just they have a lot of kids. That's sort of got them their circus sideshow freak type of fame within the U.S. But I think what's really more relevant, I don't care if they only had 4 kids, is that this quiverful movement it's fairly well established. They've got some difficulties with women's the role of women in the church, and sort of whether or not they should be free to like have their own personality and stuff like that. But in any case, the sort of the relevant things that have happened recently was their oldest son, Josh Duggar, a number of years ago, was caught leaving his sister's bedroom at some point, and it was clear in talking with the girls, the parents knew quite early on that he was engaged in what a person might call it's an opportunistic assault. So I'm going to be hesitant to say that Josh Duggar is a pedophile. I think he's somebody who's committed offenses of opportunity, where if he's placed in circumstances where he can sort of control somebody else, he sort of has a position of power over somebody else, then he'll do things that are self-gratifying, of a sexual nature. In talking with the girls, it turns out there were other friends. So now I believe the current count is that there were 5 girls who had this sort of unwanted touching. Usually the girls are in the range of 10 to 12, 10 to 14 years old. So anyway, I'll just do it in order. So Josh, this had happened, and the family was aware of it, and they had taken some sort of weird steps to kind of deal with it. They told him it was inappropriate. They eventually, apparently they had talked to a state trooper, who's now no longer available to really address this because he's in jail for 56 years, or a 56-year sentence for his involvement in a child pornography ring.
Yeah.
They also had taken him to a pastor. This pastor that's in their church is also under accusation of the same sort of opportunistic assault of young teenage girls and of young women that have worked in his employ, typically of college age. Interestingly enough, this pastor, I'm sorry, there's no way to tell the story in chronological order because the way that these events come up. This pastor and his friend have received these accusations. They're also they run a program for the Quiverful Church that's like sort of treating, it's sort of culturing for to be a proper young lady within the Quiverful movement. And parents of girls will send their girls off to this training program with this pastor and his friend, and they sort of teach them about women's roles within the church and whatnot. Let this come as no surprise to anyone that this has led to numerous allegations of some of the things that were going on there. There's stories of inappropriate touching, of the girls posing for inappropriate photographs that were part of this collection. These photographs, the accusation of whether or not this pastor and his friend were taking these photographs is unproven. None of these photographs have surfaced. But you sort of think about it, well, why would they? I mean, people who have photographs of topless 12-year-old girls tend to not be, on their hard drive in their computer, tend to not rush to the police and be like, hey, you can have my copies. So we don't really know what's going on with that. But the spectrum of allegations against this pastor and his friend seem pretty solid. It turns out 2 of the Duggar girls are amongst the people who are alleged to be victims of this pastor and his friend. So what it looks like has happened in the family is you've got the Josh Duggar had done some inappropriate touching of his sisters and friends of the sisters. So there's girls inside the family and some girls outside the family. And the girls who are molestation victims of Josh Duggar are also molestation victims of the pastor that they had sought help from when Josh was having a problem. And the only police involvement in this turns out to be a fellow they knew who's a state trooper, because he's in their church. They went to him and said, well, what do you think about this? And he says, well, I'll give the boy a talking to. And I don't know, like, what a child porn collector, when he's a 47-year-old child porn collector, what do you say to a teenage boy who was caught inappropriately touching his sister? I would imagine it's a don't get caught kind of speech. So the whole story is sort of marred by this approach of, well, yes, the parents recognized that it was wrong, but their entire solution hinged around going to other members of the church, many of whom, known to them or unknown to them, turned out to also be sex offenders in one way or another, and just not doing anything to sort of address the problem. Now, they do say, this to me, this is one of the things that's the most interesting, angering, and infuriating about this case. Everybody's like these Christians are all like, oh, they're attacking Josh Duggar. I mean, this was years ago. Like, look at how these atheists will just rally and attack Josh Duggar. There's really not much to say about Josh Duggar. I mean, he did this when he was young, but it's about the whole system they created around him to protect him, to protect the state trooper, to protect this pastor. Like, anybody who wants to molest a quiverful girl, you're going to be well shielded. That's a guarantee. That's established through all these other different ways. And then they say things like, you got Mike Huckabee coming out and saying, oh, yeah, well, I guess he did some stuff years ago when he was 14. No, it wasn't when he was 14. It started when he was 14 and went on for a period of 2 years until he finally gets shipped off to go work in Colorado. I got the wrong state. He was sent to some other state to go work on some guy's house building company. So I think the concern that people are expressing isn't necessarily about, well, this Josh Duggar is such an awful fellow. It's the concern, as I understand it, is that here you've got a family that's very aggressively involved in protecting children, right? We got to protect children. We got to protect them from the homosexuals. We got to protect them from the transsexuals that might end up in a bathroom that one of them is using. But at the same time, in their own home, they've got a boy that's molesting these other girls for a period of time, molesting friends of these girls that are not part of the family. And what do? Well, they take the girls to this pastor and his friend for, young lady training, where they allegedly get photographs taken of them, and that gets added to their collections. They go talk to a child pornography producing state trooper, and all this stuff ends up getting swept under the carpet. So to wrap up on this point, there is no prospect of a prosecution in this case because of their state's statute of limitations on this type of allegation. The prosecutors will not, and they simply cannot, under their statutory structure, hear complaints that are related to a sexual incident that happened too many years ago, to where there'd be simply no exhibits to prove it, or people's memories can't be trusted anymore.
You have got to be kidding me. There's a statute of limitations on sexual offences.
3 years. There's one more thing, and that is that Josh...
Of minors.
Even against minors?
Yeah, against minors. That's expressed in the statute.
Yes.
Wow.
So he's, since then, as the head of the Family Research Council, which is an anti-gay Christian group that seeks to oppose marriage equality laws on the grounds that homosexuals are more likely to abuse children and be sexual deviants, and protect the integrity of the Christian marriage because it promotes morality, et cetera, et cetera. The kinds of claims that, and he's done all this on the basis that he's from a family of 19 well-adjusted kids, and look how their beliefs have served them, and so the sort of the going from this angelic family with no problems to suddenly, you know, incidents of abuse and lies and, you know, all the things that they're not supposed to stand for are clearly the things that are part of their everyday lives. It's all fake. And I think that's what a lot of people were more shocked by.
Well, the two things I'd like to say before we move any further. Firstly, all the allegations, whether implied or express, are those of hogtiechamp and are not necessarily representative of the Magic Sandwich Show or any other person involved with the show. No, but on a serious note, there's one statistic that I thought you might find interesting, and again, you'll have to be looking at your Vaughan TV window to see this. My understanding is that the Duggar family has been well reported in the past by Fox News and supported. This is the coverage of the Duggar controversy, and I hope you'll be able to see that the dates are between the 21st and 24th of May of this year. That's the coverage that Fox News has given to them over this period. Comments?
I think it speaks for itself.
Predictable?
It is
Predictable. I don't know the source or how accurate that is, but I would have predicted something like that.
The source is at the bottom. Media Matters.
It says Media Matters. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I check my sources, Ozzy. Please.
I wasn't trying to impugn you in any way. So I guess there was a bit of butt covering going on.
So
I have a Facebook.
What's its fair and unbiased or something?
Yeah. Fair and balanced. Yeah.
Balanced. Yeah. There we go. Fair and balanced.
They're trying to balance out what everyone else does.
Well, that's literally
balance
their
out the
claim.
good journalism.
Yeah, that's literally their claim. They balance out what everyone else does. Every time somebody points it out, they'll say, well, gee, we're just trying to balance out all the left-wing bias. And it's just the crazy admission that, well, of course we're biased. We have to balance out everybody else's bias. And there's no focus on, hey, here's an idea. How about you actually report the truth? How about you take a look at facts? I understand there's some sensitivity around this issue because it's potentially to be seen as just merely salacious scandal reporting and rumor mongering and whatnot. But I don't think that's Fox's excuse. I think what they're doing here is they're dodging a very, very important issue, and that is that not many generations ago. I mean, those of us over 40 will remember a time where the discussion of kitty fiddling was very sort of hushed, and they didn't really talk about it out loud. And the rest of society has had to come on board with this idea. We need to decide, like, the stereotype of the pedophile having his van, giving out free candy and taking kids away from playgrounds. I mean, we need to educate kids on the actual, no offense, on the actual real world risks, which is acquaintance molestations, because these aren't like one-time events. These are things that go on and on and on, repeated. And you don't find, if you find somebody who's an uncle in a family or somebody who's molested kids in the family, or a kid in the family, you look for the other ones because they never do just one. That for some reason, the same reason we're talking about here, the religious identity, we're allowing religious people to shield the offenders from this sort of investigation and this sort of public inquiry, because we're not going to, look at what the Duggars do. We're not going to look at this whole thing. I mean, and what about these girls, right? So, I mean, we have girls in their families that we know they are, of those girls, some of them are victims of at least one molestation by at least one offender, right? Some of them multiple molestations with at least two offenders. And they got closer to God. That's the thing. They say, well, this is a blessing. The Duggars have come out and referred to this as a blessing because this turmoil has brought them all closer to God.
I'm sorry to go back to this point again. You say that we know this. Do we know this?
Do we know? Sorry, I should clarify. Sorry, which part of it? We know
the actual allegations about which you speak. These children
Josh
have been abused.
Admit. Yeah, there was no denial of the facts.
I wonder. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. We know that the girls have spoken publicly a little bit. The parents have spoken publicly. Josh Duggar has admitted that the inappropriate touching had happened. They even confirmed the time frame that it happened, so it wasn't a one-time incident. It was several incidents. The other things, the state trooper, there is no doubt, because of exhibits that were available on his computer and recorded conversations he had in a sting operation. There's no doubt that the state trooper was a producer and distributor of child pornography. To be clear, there was no indication that his child pornography enterprise had any involvement from the Duggar family, either participation or contribution from the Duggar parents, or using any of the Duggar children as exhibits. So that's totally separate in that way, but we do know that he's guilty. What we do know of this pastor and his friend is that there have been numerous allegations from many of the teenage girls, and a current civil claim against him from some girls who were like high school age, when they're now college age, who'd been working for him. But these are unproven civil allegations, before a civil court, and he's not been charged to my knowledge. So when I say we know this, I probably would merit correction there, because what I should say is we know that these allegations are being made, but no, I won't say it's risen to the level of there being a criminal conviction for that one case.
Just before we, I'm sure people want to come back on that, but let me just clarify about the statute of limitations. I may have misunderstood what you were saying. Does the statute run only against minors rather than adults? For example, are you suggesting that, well, I presume you're not suggesting, perhaps you are, that the statute of limitations would run against an adult in relation to child abuse?
It's had a thorny application. So the answer is yes, it does apply to adult offenders of children. Where it has thorny application is the notion of discovery of an offensive event, right? So that as you would know, and perhaps for the benefit of the audience, the problem with these statutes of limitations is it's the clock doesn't start ticking at the conclusion of the offense, but there are other things that can sort of extend it. It's things like whether or not it was reasonable to discover this. So you may have something like a 14-year-old who was a victim of a molestation that doesn't have the full psychological wherewithal or the confidence to be able to come forward and tell somebody else until she's 17 years old. There may be an investigation and they find that there's other victims and other things that emerge from this. There may even be exhibits that she kept or whatever else. And it may be 4 years before the prosecution goes on. They would then take the deadline to the clock to start running at the time that she made the complaint, because that's evidence that she had the wherewithal to make the complaint. So it's not the case that any sex crime against a child just evaporates after 3 years. That's not true. But it is true that in the wording of the statute, it is intended to shield a person from, well, let me put it this way. Somebody who was molested when they were, say, 15, if that person came forward when she was 22, that case simply would not be heard, because the presumption would be that by the time she was 18, she should have had the psychological wherewithal to have discovered, as it were, that she had been a molestation years before. Those cases are simply barred, statute barred.
I find it's absolutely staggering, because apart from the most minor offences in this country, there is no statute of limitations against any criminal activity.
Would you permit me to put a pin in that and come back to it in a few minutes? Well, I've talked quite a bit on this topic, so I'll let others do it, and I'll address that real quick. So just bear with me.
Of course. Again, we're coming into the close, and there's one element of the show that I want to introduce as a bit of fun and whatever, which is I don't know quite how to label it. Maybe a few minutes of stupidity that need addressing, or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I was very keen that both Hogtie and Concordance were here to watch this. I am subscribed to Answers in Genesis and their emails, and they send out emails, and I get a link to their website. And I downloaded a video last night in preparation for this show, and this is from their kids section. Now you might ask why I went to look at the kids section, but it was for educational purposes only, and I found a video, and hopefully I'll be able to dig it up. take me a few clicks, I think, but it should be appearing on your screen fairly soon. It's about 3 minutes long, but I just wanted I don't know, it just frustrates me so much that an organisation that with such money and such power as Ken Ham has, that they can be making videos directed at children. And as I say, I think it's 3 minutes long. I want you to count up how many factual errors or disingenuous arguments are made during 4 minutes. Okay, I've got to click that, and I think... Oh, no, hang on. No, whoa, don't do that. Oh, no, I almost deleted it. Let me start again. Settings, that's what I want. I've got to press play.
What really happened to the dinosaurs?
Many people are perplexed by the topic of dinosaurs. Where did they come from? When did they live? What happened to them? You see, when you dig up a dinosaur skeleton, it doesn't come with a label attached saying, "Hi, I'm 65 million years old and this is what happened to me." We have to interpret that skeleton in relation to the past. So where did dinosaurs come from? What happened to them? When did they live? I want to show you that when you take God at his word in the book of Genesis, that we can explain dinosaurs, and observational science actually confirms that explanation based upon the Bible. See, the Bible tells us that God made the land animals on day 6 of creation. And who else was created on day 6? Well, Adam and Eve. And how long ago was that? Well, when you add up all the dates in the Bible, about 6,000 years. So, taking God at his word in Genesis, dinosaurs lived beside people about 6,000 years ago. And they were vegetarian to start with. Genesis chapter 1 verse 29 tells us that all the animals were vegetarian. But then Adam sinned, and because of sin, everything changed. The whole of creation now groans because of sin. In fact, after the event of Noah's flood, God told Noah that now humans could eat meat, could eat animal flesh. But before that time, they were instructed only to be vegetarian. So sometime after sin, obviously animals started changing their diets as well. Then the Bible tells us that there was a global flood, and 2 of every kind of land-dwelling, air-breathing animal went on board the boat that Noah built, Noah's Ark. Now, people often say, wait a minute, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dinosaur kinds. No, there might be hundreds of dinosaur names, and many of those names are given to different variations within a dinosaur kind. But when you actually work through it, there's probably less than 50 dinosaur kinds. The T-Rex type kind, the raptor type kind, the sauropod type kind, and so it goes on. And the other thing to remember is that the average size of a dinosaur is only the size of a sheep or a German shepherd dog or a small pony or something like that. You see, some of the dinosaurs did grow large, like the sauropods, but even they hatched from eggs and were once young adults, and so would not have been that large. Actually, there was plenty of room on board Noah's Ark for 2 of every kind of the dinosaur kind. And I'm sure that God chose those young adults that were ready for the new world to populate in the new world. What happened to those land animals that didn't go on board the Ark? They were drowned. Many of them turned into fossils. The dinosaur fossils we find, most of them probably come from the time of the flood, over 4,300 years ago, and therefore they're only thousands of years old, not millions of years old. Those that came off the Ark started to spread out over the earth, and then, because of changing conditions, many animals have become extinct, including the dinosaurs. Really, for animals to become extinct is nothing new. We see it happening every year. Now, is there any evidence that's consistent with that explanation of dinosaurs? Actually, there is lots of evidence consistent with that. We have dragon legends all over the earth, just as we have flood legends. Flood legends attest to the fact there was a real flood. Dragon legends attest to the fact there were real animals called dragons, and the descriptions of those creatures in many instances fit the dinosaurs. And then there are cave paintings all over the earth done by people hundreds of years ago who drew animals that they were familiar with, and some of those paintings look just like the dinosaurs. And you know, there's even indication in the Bible of a dinosaur that lived beside a man after the flood. Go and read the book of Job, Job chapter 40 verse 15. Behemoth, the largest land animal God made. The description fits something like a sauropod dinosaur living with Job after the flood. We've also found in our present world dinosaur bones with what appear to be red blood cells and soft tissue still in them, indicating they can't be millions of years old. You know, when people ask me what happened to the dinosaurs, my usual answer is, well, they died. But of course, they didn't die out millions of years ago. Many died at the time of the flood. And those that were alive on Noah's Ark, their descendants died out sometime after the flood. It's the Bible's history that explains dinosaurs.
Why is it that every time I see that person, I want to slap him? I'm not a violent person. I really am not a violent person. But
yeah, it's a very punchable face.
It is.
It really, really is.
You know,
and a bunch of crap comes out of it.
When we go back to the question, I'm sorry, Shanna, just very briefly, when we go back to the question about whether creationists are deliberately dishonest, every time I see him, I think the answer is undoubtedly yes. Sorry, Shanna, do go on.
Oh no, I was just saying that nothing but crap spews from his face that we would like to punch. That's all. Go on.
That's a very fine contribution, and you're not going to find any disagreement here. Factual errors. Before we come on to soft tissue, I know Hogtie, you wanted to concordance. Hogtie wanted to talk about that, but this is, as I say, from his website, from the page that is directed at children, and this is a sort of nonsense that he's spewing. Factual errors. Let's just start with them. Concordance.
The idea of the number of species of dinosaurs fitting on the ark, I think that one's laughable.
And let's just be clear. What he said, there were probably about 50 species, of which there were about 2, of which there would be 2, that probably were babies and about the size of a dog.
I mean, 50 species of dinosaur? Really? Really?
That's what he said.
No, that's a factual error.
Explain why.
Because there are more than 50 species of dinosaur.
I was hoping a little bit more scientific.
Well, I don't know the number, but I can guarantee you it's not 50 or less.
Hogtie.
That's the hardest question you've ever asked us. What factual errors in this thing? There were just so many of them. There's lots of people who know more about dinosaurs than me should comment on his dinosaur gaffes. His Book of Job gaffe is one thing. There's no his concept that there's a sauropod dinosaur described in the Book of Job is utterly laughable. A person has to either know nothing about the anatomy of sauropods or nothing about the Book of Job. I think what they do is they take what's written in the Book of Job and your brain scramble. He's full of shit.
I recall that doesn't Job, it references the size of the stones of the animal, right? And as you might be aware,
go ahead. You know that. Yeah, no. Stones. If you're an expert in stones and sinew, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I understood that to be a reference to the external male genitalia, the balls of the dinosaur, which, of course, if they are theropods, they don't have external genitalia in the form of stones. So clearly not. It might be a description of an elephant. That seems plausible.
Elephants got some balls on them.
They do. I've seen them.
Mm-hmm.
Not up close, but from a distance.
You don't want to be. But no, the Dinosauria, no external testicles. There are no sinews holding the testicles in place. The tail's wrong. The reference to a cedar, I don't know. It's just numerous things wrong with his understanding of how Job might apply to actual dinosaurs discovered, or remnants of dinosaurs discovered in the real world.
Again, it kind of, I suppose, goes back to the point that I was making earlier about should I respect your views? Should I respect a creationist who holds the views that he does, or she does? Because it said so in the Bible. It seems to me one of the most ridiculous arguments I've ever come across. And again, I've got no respect for it. How can I have respect for it? Shanna, come on. Talk to us, Shanna. You're desperate to say something.
You can't. You can't. It's when you're asking about the factual errors. Where do you even start? And then with all the logical errors. There's cave paintings from Tuesday, and that shows that. What? You can't take it seriously. You can't respect it. I don't know how. That's it. I don't know what to do with this mess.
I'm totally
That's
with you.
good.
I don't know what to do, and yet I suppose if pushed and pressed on it, prove that he's wrong. I can't prove that what he's saying is wrong to a degree. I have to rely on others to do that for me. Well, yeah, I can't prove the Earth is millions of years old, but I know that other people can. That's the sort of argument I'm saying. So I am somewhat restricted in what I can say about what he's saying. But I just know he's wrong. Ozzy, how do you deal with something when you know that the majority of the scientific opinion and evidence supports a particular position, but you can't yourself hold out that position because you don't have sufficient knowledge about it? What's the best way of dealing with a sort of like discourse and discussion in that case?
I appeal to the relevant experts. There's a tendency for people to sort of play name that fallacy and say, oh, argumentum ad verecundiam, where you're appealing to an illegitimate. It's an illegitimate appeal to authority, but there is such a thing as a legitimate appeal to authority, and one can appeal to people that have relevant expertise in a domain of knowledge. So that's what I do when I'm asked, why do you believe in evolution? Well, I know a little bit about it, and I can give some reasons. But I mean, when it gets down to the nitty gritty of certain things, and the people, what about this and what about this? And if I happen to not know, well, I don't just bluff and say, well, I don't know. But if you can be wrong, I'll say I don't know. And here's why I think you're very probably wrong. There's this scientific consensus against you of trained professionals worldwide from different countries, people with different religious commitments and no religious commitment. And the only way that they could all be wrong would have to be that if there's some kind of vast conspiracy, which it seems to me on its face preposterous. So I'm going to defer to the relevant experts, um, because I don't have the time and the wherewithal to investigate every question. So I investigate. I mean, there are areas where I have some knowledge and some expertise, and I'll argue for myself there. But where I don't, it's just like sometimes I consult a plumber, sometimes I consult a mechanic, and sometimes I'll consult the evolutionary biologist, and sometimes I'll consult the physicist. That's not an illegitimate appeal to authority, as long as those people have relevant expertise. If someone's asked me how to interpret a passage of the Bible, well, usually I'll defer to textual critics who've studied these works in the original languages. I mean, this is just how we have to proceed. So that's what I do. I'm never impressed when someone tries to do this kind of bullshit gish gallop that this guy is doing. I mean, that doesn't even faze me, and it doesn't worry me. And if some creationist says, "Oh yeah, but you're not able to answer all those questions," I don't have any reason to think that guy knows a damn thing about what he's talking about, right? It's impossible for him to have the relevant expertise in all of the things that he's talking about. He can't have relevant expertise in history, in archaeology, in geology, in paleontology, in genetics, and all of these things that he'd have to be an expert in to be pontificating on these subjects with such confidence. It's impossible. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Nobody could be authoritative on all of those subjects. And I suspect he's not an authority on any of those subjects. So I'm completely unperturbed. I think that what he knows about this stuff in the way of relevant expertise and formal study is exactly what I know, which is to say almost nothing, right? So I'm unfazed, and there are people in the YouTube community that we interact with who pull the same kinds of moves. And I just, I'm completely unfazed and unperturbed and unconcerned by it. And I don't know why anybody thinks that there's got to be an answer to this. The answer is simply there's such a thing as relevant expertise. There are relevant experts. You have to consult them. We have no choice but to trust what the physicists say and what the chemists say and what the biologists say and what the evolutionary biologists say and the geneticists are saying. We just have to trust them. That doesn't mean they can't be wrong. It doesn't mean that we are assenting to 100% confidence. It's just that where shall I place my confidence in what some know nothing idiot who overstates his confidence is saying, or the more qualified carefully stated opinions of people who have dedicated their lives to the study and who together put forward a consensus view. Well, it's not even close. I mean, the scales are like this, right? So that's how I see it. That never bothers me. I've never seen that as a particular problem. It's no different than, you go to the gym to work out, and there's some guy there who's not in particularly good shape, who's giving you all kinds of advice on how to work out. Meanwhile, there are fitness trainers there. There are people who study human kinetics and human physiology, nutritional science, and exercise fitness and stuff like that for years, and they're all built like Superman, right? And well, who am I going to trust? If these people all have a tendency to agree that such and such a way of exercising is good, and this other guy over here tells me no, and that all these people don't know what they're talking about. I mean, when you put it starkly like that, it's obvious. You don't have to worry about that. Is there a consensus of fitness instructors, nutritional scientists out there who are conspiring against what this guy happens to believe? I don't believe that's errant nonsense. So whenever creationists talk this way, what they're positing is the grandest conspiracy in history, a conspiracy that involves people who've devoted their lives to higher academic and scientific research across generations, across countries, across national boundaries, across religious and faith boundaries, in many, many different scientific disciplines. That's the conspiracy you're talking about. Every other conspiracy ever put forward pales in comparison to this granddaddy, this whopper of a conspiracy theory, right? So it's a joke. It's a laugh. I can't take anything that guy says seriously, because he can't have the expertise that he's talking about. And that's what it amounts to. There's such a thing as relevant expertise. There's such a thing as a legitimate appeal to authority. And a legitimate appeal to authority does not mean that you will absolutely believe without qualification any old thing that they say. It just means I have better reason to put my trust in what those people are saying than what some know-nothing is saying. Sorry, it was a bit of a rant.
Yeah, it was. But we expect that from you, Shanna.
We're used to that, Oz. I'm agreeing, and I wanted to add something to it. When people like Cam or other people come in, they say something, they just flat just say something like it's true, then they say, well, you can't prove me wrong. So what? They haven't given a good argument. They haven't given good reasons and good evidence. They haven't done any of that. So just because I'm going to go back to the kid with the monster under the bed example. If the kid wants me to prove that there's no monster under the bed, like I don't have to. I don't have to. There's not one. You're never going to get eaten. It's fine. It sounds mean, but I don't have to take it seriously when things are put forward like that, like what Oz was saying, without the relevant expertise required to make the claims that are being made, and with no evidence to support, not nose weak, but very teeny tiny little evidence to support what's being said in the first place. I don't have to take those kinds of things seriously, ever. That was all I wanted to add.
Can I add something here? It's a little lateral, but I think we'll come back to it. And I understand we want to do soft tissues on dinosaurs, but the reason why creationism is so important to so many Christians is interesting to me, and I'm actually more interested in some people who believe in sort of the old Earth creationism. The world was created, but a long, long, long time ago, because a lot of the basics of Christianity, the sacrifice and original sin, seems to be bound in the idea of Adam and Eve being in a literal Eden. Because that's sort of the fall, and without the fall, then the sacrifice of Jesus seems suddenly less significant. So if you say to them, the core of their belief, it makes them wonder why the rest of it seems to be so aligned with a particular story.
Can I just pause you there? You broke
Sure.
up. You broke up a few moments into what you were saying, and I suspect that the gist has been lost a little bit. Could I just invite you, however irritable it is, to Just
Sure.
start from the
I'll
get-go.
summarize now that I've said it a few times. I can get to the meat of it. Genesis is core to the Christian belief because and sacrifice of Jesus, sacrifice or death would seem less significant if there weren't in fact Adam and Eve, and understand why creationism is so important to some Christians, because it is fundamental to their belief.
I think we kind of got the gist of that, yes. Does someone want to respond?
Yeah, he broke up a bit there, and I think we got the gist of it. But maybe some of the viewers and listeners didn't get the gist of it. But I'll echo what he was saying. Genesis is a real problem within Christianity. It stands falsified by science and history and archaeology on any plain reading. So one has to sort of entertain all kinds of very figurative, looser readings of the text, of the creation account, of the story of the fall, of the story of the flood, and so forth. But I mean, the story of the fall, as Concordance says, is absolutely integral. If there wasn't a fall, if death wasn't introduced into the world because of sin, and we're not in a fallen state as a result of what Adam and Eve allegedly did, then the sacrifice of Jesus means nothing. Isn't here for that didn't happen for any reason. So Christianity really does rest on the story of Adam and Eve. It's really hard to sort of make sense of that story without taking that story literally. And when you take it figuratively, then we don't know what it means. Okay, well, maybe something happened there that makes Jesus death and massacre and resurrection relevant, but what how do you connect the dots, right? And so I think that's why some fundamentalists really cling to this, is they do realize that the core teachings of Christianity, the salvation doctrine, doesn't make any sense unless Genesis is construed literally, right? And an old Earth is a problem. I mean, how long were people? How long were organisms, living? If there was no death, before the fall, wouldn't we have been overpopulated, or were they not reproducing? What was going on, right, with other organisms before? So people have to sort of construe the story literally. If you don't construe the story literally, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's the same thing with the flood narrative. The flood narrative doesn't matter. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you try to say, oh, it's a local flood. If it's a local flood, why did Noah build an ark? Why did he have to gather these animals? Why didn't he just gather his family and his flocks and stuff like that, just walk away? Right? There's no need to preserve these animals. There's no need to build an ark if it's a local flood. Just start walking. By the time these, you walk for a few months, you'll be so far away long before the flood happens. The story doesn't make any sense unless it's a global flood. And it's the same thing with the sort of the story of Christian salvation and atonement and all that. None of that makes sense except in light of the story of Adam and Eve, and that story has to be pretty much construed literally. Construed figuratively, it can mean anything.
I think we may have lost Concordance, and I'm also aware of the time. I know we started as we normally do, a few moments late, but we're past the 2-hour mark. There are so many things that I want to talk about leading on from that, and also the topics that we haven't touched upon that I wanted to. But I think it would be appropriate if we ended the show now. Are people minded to do an after show? I'm not a great fan of them, I have to say, but I will do one on this occasion if people are wanting to do so, and I'll introduce people from the chat. It's up to you, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? Well, the first comment I see is after show.
Yeah, there was the ones who were fans of after shows are vocal about it. The rest are like, oh, whatever, you guys do what you want. We have a couple of issues we could probably clean up quickly, but
yeah, let's clean up issues quickly if we can. I don't think we can, but go for it.
I think we can. Well, do we want to touch? Can I touch on the soft tissue thing just to?
No, I think we're gonna. You see that's going to take us a while. I reckon. To do it justice, I think that's going to take us a while. And by a while, I mean more than 5 minutes. Now, either we can do it in an after show, or we can save it for the next show. I don't know.
Okay. Well, then
I'll tell you my major concern is when I see videos on YouTube of a particular show, whatever, and I see it going anything beyond a couple of hours, it's like that is a huge turn off.
Oh no, I agree.
And when I see, and I'm not naming names, but when I see shows that have run or hangouts that have run for 4 or 5 hours, it's like I'm not even going to begin to look at them.
Yeah, I don't watch them either.
I try and keep it down to 2 hours as best I can. So I don't know. I mean, these are things we can talk about. This is not. It certainly isn't a topical issue in that it's sort of like, I mean, soft tissue in dinosaurs. I think
it'll come up. My main point of it was going to be,
a while.
It just keeps coming up. It keeps coming up.
I can't stop you. You go for it.
No. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that's what my main point was to be, was that it just keeps coming up. So we can talk about it on another time, because you know what? It doesn't matter what we say. They're still going to be talking about it next week. So, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Does everyone agree? Okay. We haven't agreed on anything. Should we end this show? Do you want to start an after show or not? It's entirely a matter for you.
Well, I certainly. Well, as you're deciding that, I certainly do want to clear up a couple of the sweep up these little issues. For one, the Richter scale, I did look up. It's the logarithm of the amplitude of something moving, whatever. There is no indication that it's capped at 10. In fact, any of the published discussion of, for example, the Yucatan impact 65 million years ago, puts it at about a Richter score of around 13. Or thereabouts. Some say more, some say less. So there certainly is no. It's not a 1 to 10 scale. It just goes on forever. Well, presumably there'd be an earthquake so big it would blow up the Earth. So I don't think it goes up to 100 for practical reasons. Second, so it's state of Arkansas. You're asking about state of Arkansas. The 2010 Arkansas Code, Title 5 is your criminal offenses, and Chapter 1. Subtitle 1, Chapter 1 is your general provisions, including things like the statute of limitations, which in brief, I can tell you it starts like this. It says, a prosecution for murder may be commenced at any time, but, except as otherwise provided in this section, a prosecution for another offense shall be commenced within the following periods of limitation after the offense's commission. So murder is the only one accepted. I know you're thinking it's murder and rape, but it's not. There is an exception if it's a rape and they're able to produce DNA evidence. That's a different issue. Class A, Class Y felonies are up to 6 years is the limitation. For Class B, Class C, and Class D felonies, or unclassified felonies, it's 3 years from the commission. That would include things like sexual assault in the second degree, which you'd have to discuss that. That's my understanding of what Josh Duggar would have been guilty of. Incest, endangering the welfare of a minor, permitting abuse of minor, all of those things are in the Class C and Class D, which would be a 3-year limitation. The point I'd referred to is saying, well, in some cases they say, discovery when the person comes to an age of mental wherewithal and stuff. This comes from case law. I was incorrect about that. It is actually statutory in Arkansas. And it goes like this. Where is it? I can't find it. Doesn't matter. What it says is that if the person is a minor victim of a sexual offense, then the clock starts 3 years from when they become 18 years old. I said that was a case law thing. It turns out in Arkansas that's actually statute. So without actually reading the statute, you'll take my word for it. Does that? I know it's crazy. I know. I understand when you ask me out of skepticism, it's just like you think, well, did Hogtie not look this up properly? Or you think, are these people just living in a system of batshit crazy laws?
I would never, no, I would never ever accuse you of not looking things up. You normally get things spot on. I'm just absolutely amazed. Because what you seem to be suggesting, that a lot of cases are taking place in this country at the moment, which relate to historical child abuse, you're saying could not take place in America by reason of statute.
Yeah, it's Title V. Yeah, it's in Arkansas. It could not be incest, molestation, using a minor. Here's another one.
Specific, what I'm talking about now is the follow-on from the Jimmy Savile case. There are many people being prosecuted as a result of investigations into him and his friends and cohorts and whatever that are bringing up allegations from maybe 30, even 40 years ago. And they are being prosecuted at the moment. And you're saying that could not happen.
Done and dusted. The exceptions would be things like, let's say that there were photographic exhibits of a molestation that happened. Somebody who's currently in possession of the photographic exhibits would be currently breaking the law, or someone who's been in possession of them within the last 3 years would still be in jeopardy because they're currently breaking the law. But the person who took the photos 8 years ago, 10 years ago, even 4 years ago would be immune from prosecution. There would be, they would say, estoppel by statute.
Okay, I get some messages being fed to me behind the scenes, and I have to say that everyone has to go, so there will be no after show. Can I thank everyone that's been involved in the show, everyone that's watched it, and everyone that will watch it subsequently on YouTube. Most of the links, well, all as best I can, will be posted under the video when it's posted on YouTube. Any comments or observations or topics that you would like to discuss, you can message us. Best way to do it is probably through the Magic Sandwich Show website. Send us an email through there. Okay, there we go. I think we're going to end the show, which takes 2 presses. Can I thank everyone again? Any last words from anyone before I finish? No?
Thanks all.
No?
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Thank you
We're
very much.
done. See you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.